Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Rawae KARMIM, and I am an assistant professor and a researcher at Akhaway University in Morocco. My research interests include literature, cultural studies, gender studies, education, translation, and social sciences, among other things. Before starting, I want to thank Akita International University for offering me the opportunity to present my paper in their 2024 research showcase. As you can see, my paper is titled The Reclaimed Agency of the Prostituted Identity in Meryem Alaoui's Straight from the Horse's Mouth. I will be providing a textual analysis from a cultural and gendered perspective to the aforementioned novel. And here is my outline. I will start by a brief introduction, then I will talk about lived experiences of reified bodies, and then a conclusion. And I'm here at the end of the day with a bombshell in my arms. Isn't that right, beautiful? And turning towards his friend, he said, "Look how beautiful she is. How often do you see girls like this?" The male gaze has been a rudimentary theme to explore when it comes to cultural and gender studies, for its implications, especially within sexual paradigms, are still taboo in multiple societies for various cultural and religious reasons. In her translated novel, Straight from the Horse's Mouth, Maryam Alaoui's protagonist Jmiaa is subjugated to this male gaze as a sex worker who is essentialized to her reproductive parts by her clients. Jmiaa reports from proximity on the lived experiences of her fellow sex workers in a poor neighborhood in the city of Casablanca in Morocco in a raw and profane language that easily translates the precarious and objectifying environment that these women live in. Throughout her novel, Alaoui shows that phallocentrism dominates everyone's behavioral framework within a social paradigm of gender-constructed power relations. Through her protagonist, Jmiaa, she relates, "The men who've had difficult weeks come to see us. They spend the afternoon in one of the local bars, and when they leave around 4 or 5 o'clock, after several storks or special, life seems good. They have just one desire, to make the pleasure and the oblivion last, and they do it inside us. It doesn't last long, but it's something." End quote. This shows that in the novel, the majority of her female characters' added value is ultimately related to the size of their bosoms and rears. In addition, Alaoui highlights this deep-seated self-sexualization that Jmiaa and all of her co-workers inflict upon themselves since it is the only way they know how to survive. Jmiaa states, "When a man follows me, I'm concentrating on how I move. I show them that I want them because in general, men like that. And we like when they're happy because then they pay without making a fuss." End quote. This awareness of her self-objectification helps Alaoui's protagonist shift from disempowerment to empowerment, but helps Jmiaa resist her subjugation and objectification, while subverting the male gaze and regaining control of her agency to develop an authentic identity on her terms. This paper will thus shed light on the Moroccan novel as a discursive space governed by ideologies that need to be scrutinized and deconstructed. It is a medium that subverts social norms and conventions by challenging the status quo of society while dealing with narratives of emancipation and moving towards a female identity that possesses the proper means of power relations to talk back and be in control of its own consciousness. Straight from the Horse's Mouth represents the bustling life of sex workers in Casablanca with brutal honesty and harsh candor while they face daily ordeals of phallocentrism and misogyny. While Alaoui is very meticulous in depicting certain imagery, the raw profanity of the novel projects the reader to the center of the lived experiences of her characters and provides them with a situated knowledge of a gendered human condition. Beyond mere shock value or victim narrative, the readers follow Jmiaa in her journey of healing from trauma, conquering addiction, and eventual emancipation. So let's move to the second part, lived experiences of reified bodies. Human lived experience and condition is what people undergo and live in an immediate way, which has always been an interesting point in literature. Scott defines experience as knowledge gathered from past events, whether by conscious observation or by consideration and reflection. It is a particular kind of consciousness which can, in some context, be distinguished from reason or knowledge. In other words, situated knowledge stems from lived experience, which provides a liberal humanistic view on life with shared practices that people undergo. Visual experience provide a plethora of narratives developing on terms of eyewitness accounts and first-person narratives, what creates an impact about what is being said or written. In a way, making the movement visible breaks the silence around it. Even though this does not represent objectivist means of knowledge production, the fluidity of interpretation and the multiplicity of truth and meaning makes experience become a discursive fact. Similarly to Scott's Delaney in Straight from the Horse's Mouth, Alaoui, through her protagonist, seeks to break an absolutely sanctioned public silence on questions of sexual practice to reveal something that exists but that is suppressed. Jmiaa states, when I'm finished working, I don't waste time. I put my jalaba, which is a traditional Moroccan dress, back on, smooth out its creases, and I wait for the guy to zip up his fly, smoke a cigarette, and leave so I can go back to my spot and harpoon another guy. This provides the readers with a metaphor of visibility, crucial transparency, and immediate experience into the lives and routines of sex workers in Casablanca. To put matters differently, documenting the existence of these sex workers in all their variety and multiplicity and writing about them renders historical what has hitherto been hidden from history, while abstracting elements of human experience and talking about a universal condition. After the arrival of Halima, the new girl, Jmiaa writes in her journal, "It took me years to learn what I know. I am not about to give everything away to some slut who's just starting out." This shows that the protagonist talks about anything in the only available language her social, religious, and cultural contexts offer. In other words, experience is a learned behavior that can never be mediated because of contexts of representation, language, and dominant values. This means that experience can never be pure, fixed, or transparent. Therefore, when it comes to the lived experiences of sex workers in Casablanca, Jmiaa, as a fictional protagonist, perpetuates an image and a version of reality through a constructed knowledge. She writes, "I approach the ashtray, I light a cigarette, and I puff on it rapidly as I continue to tell her about my days, emphasizing what's essential, quantity. Because you have to get with them men to live, at least 6 per day, 7 or 8 is better, but 6 is pretty good." This shows that self-sexualization and self-objectification is a normal practice in Jmiaa's line of work, where the female's value is strictly tied to the number of men she brings back. Demonstrating the way internalized misogyny operates, Jmiaa exhibits constructed and learned sexist behaviors toward herself and other females. In other words, dialogic practices of internalized sexism fall into 4 categories: assertions of incompetence, which expresses an internalized sense of powerlessness, competition between women, the construction of women as objects, and the invalidation or derogation of women. In the case of the novel analyzed, Jmiaa competes with other women in her field of work, objectifies herself and others, and degrades and subjugates herself and others. Consciously, nevertheless, she writes, "And it's true that I always walk quickly, except when I'm looking for a man, because then you will have to look attractive. When that's on my mind, I slow down and I try to look good. I sway my hips slowly, I look right and left, I lean on my left leg, then on my right like a camel. From behind, it's a slow, nervous movement. My butt cheeks rise and fall in jerks. It's appetizing, like the caramel pudding I buy for my daughter. I get 1,000 to 1,600 reals a pop, and I know what I'm talking about. I've been in this profession for nearly 15 years now." So this portrays the behavioral framework of female bodies with a patriarchal mindset in a setting where the female's value is tied to her looks, body, and sexual proficiency, demonstrating the way the unconscious of the patriarchal society has structured gendered representations. Jmiaa also talks about how aggressive, hostile, and uncomfortable male behavior is solely related to their egos and pride, which limits their senses of empathy and sensitivity and increases their apathy and violence. Moreover, the males in contact with the protagonist all lack confidence in themselves and seek to dominate, subjugate, and oppress in order to establish an illusionary self-worth at the expense of the other. These males turn out to be sexually aggressive, coercive, and believe that forcing their way into sexual relations is the only way to gain compliance. Mulvey highlights that the function of the woman in forming the patriarchal unconscious is important, since she symbolizes the castration threat by her real absence of a penis. For this, Jmiaa states, Samira went to the bathroom. As soon as she got up, he put one of his hands on my ass. Normally, he doesn't put his hands on me because Samira doesn't like it when he touches other girls. And I understand that, but I left his hand where it was. I am not crazy to push a cop off of me. He was happy because in the afternoon he had nabbed a thief, a little young thing from who knows where, and he had had his fun with him in the pitch. Since their luck was really rotten that day, they found themselves confronted by Aziz, Samira's cop, who couldn't wait for a guy more pathetic than he was himself to fall into his lap. While Aziz was recounting the story, he was reveling in it. The more the kid tried to protect his face, the more Aziz slapped him, a real rabid dog. As he told the story, he was howling with laughter. End quote. This violent behavior, accompanied with drug use and alcohol, gives Jmiaa's male character a sense of purpose and accomplishment. The majority of the males mentioned in the novel relish in abuse, patronizing, sexualizing, raping, subjugating, and oppressing their female counterparts. Aziz's brutal display of violence and power relations was not the only one in the novel. Jmiaa talks through her lived experience as a sex worker who automatically transforms into a sexual object for use and abuse as soon as her clients pay. Since she receives a remuneration for what she does, she is at the mercy of her clients for both physical and mental vilification. She states, the guy who wants you to devour him, holding into your neck like it's the last thing on earth. And another quote, this guy is furious. The overzealous cop charges. He kicks, hits, and tears your shoulders. His hands whip you. When he's done, his menacing eyes challenges the earth over which he is the master. The illusion transforms into hatred, so he hits you because he is only himself, tortured, drunk, and alone. In this case, these females are othered and are treated as inhuman outsiders who are only there for the pleasure of the phallocentric males while serving a reproductive function. In other words, the female identity is essentialized to genitals and sexual conquests. This discourse reproduces phallocentrism in the sense that it produces specific meaning associated with sexual behavior for the purpose of reproducing pleasure for one party. Sorry. Nevertheless, Jmiaa's oppression started long before her profession as a sex worker. While married to Hamid as a young female, he introduced her to a sexual marital life filled with humiliation, selfishness, violence, and rape. He started making money off of her while forcing her to sleep with his friends. He had an obsession with going abroad and saw that the only way to do so is to prostitute his young wife and treat her as a piece of meat for the pleasure of his friends. Jmiaa's trauma and fight-or-flight response turned into a defense survival mechanism and realized very early on that male pleasure pays well. She writes on her increasing hatred and discontent for him, and I quote, as I was sleeping, I felt him enter and hump me, rigid like a donkey in heat. My nose detected him before my thighs, and then over time, I stopped wanting to touch him, even when he was sober. By way of response and telling me to mind my own business, he slapped me so hard he gave me a black eye. It was the first time he had raised a hand on me, and from that day on, his hand would remain high, searching for any pretext to land on my face. I bit him, Hamid's friend, contorting myself like a worm and calling for Hamid. He squeezed his hand over my mouth even harder and whispered into my ear, Hamid, don't tell me he didn't warn you. As soon as he felt me drained of my strength, he wanted me, Hamid. And I did not move again until morning, end quote. This represents the beginning of a life filled with traumatizing experiences, where the male counterpart will always be associated with violence and rape. Jmiaa was stuck between Hamid's irrational obsession with money and unreasonable jealousy bursts, and was the victim of a discourse of males focusing the sexual discourse away from their friendships and onto the female in such a way that they maintain their positions of dominance and control while defining masculinity in terms of subjugation and sexual conquests. These events led Jmiaa to start a road down self-medication, alcoholism, and addiction as a coping mechanism. Only after she was hired for a movie and only after she started making a living by being an actress that Jmiaa had some time to self-reflect and undergo a deep retrospection that will begin her healing journey. She writes, never again will a drop of alcohol go down Jmiaa's throat, never, not in this world or not in the next one. So after a difficult life as an objectified prostitute in the streets of Casa, our protagonist meets a female director who casts her as a lead role in her movie. She learns the rope of the profession and eventually ends up acting in a Spanish telenovela that aired on Moroccan TV. Jmiaa becomes a star of her neighborhood and ultimately reclaimed her identity's agency. She can now define her lived experiences as she chooses, not as it is forced on her. So, to sum up, gender and sexuality in life writing offer an outlet for the scrutiny and the deconstruction of a preconceived patriarchal setting where the female character is often objectified and reified for the pleasure of her male counterpart. This paper provided a textual analysis of the French novel La Vérité Sort de la Bouche du Cheval, written by the Moroccan Meryem Alaoui, and translated to English as Straight from the Horse's Mouth by Emma Ramadan. The research focused on the novel's protagonist Jmiaa, a sex worker in a working class neighborhood in Casablanca, who reports from proximity on the lived experiences of her fellow sex workers and their clients, while demonstrating the unconscious way phallocentrism rules everyone's behavioral framework within a social paradigm of precarity and destitution. Far removed from an essentialized victim narrative, and in a world where the protagonist can only exist within the sexualized gaze of her clients, the paper concludes that Jmiaa was able to resist her subjugation and objectification while claiming the male gaze and using it so as to reel back the control of her own agency to the medium of film in order to start her healing journey from her past traumas and to finally develop an authentic identity on her terms. Thank you so much for your attention. And again, I would like to thank Akita International University for allowing me to be part of their research showcase. It has been a pleasure. Thank you again, and goodbye.